Hey guys, what's up? So, just gonna do a deck profile on a Necroz Dogmatika Shaddoll deck. Um, it's a pretty simple and straightforward deck to play. I think it's got the both of best worlds. It is a mixture of engines, and sometimes you will definitely have some pretty weird hands, but I think this version is pretty fun to play rather than like a pure Shaddoll deck or a pure um, Invoke deck with something like a Eldritch invokes or Invoke with like a bunch of hand traps or Invoke and Kaiju's. Um, in my real life deck, I play Invokes with Dogmatika plus the Dragoon engine, kinda. But obviously Dragoon is banned in the OCG, and DPE or Phoenix Enforcer hasn't been released to uh, Masters Duels yet. So we're kind of stuck with kind of an older build of the deck. But I still think it's pretty good for the format. It's still pretty strong, especially in the best of one format. Um, it can have a good first turn, can have a good second turn. With this type of deck, though, I think you do want to go second, and then not first. But it can do either. It honestly can play either first or second. It doesn't really matter too much. Um, so with this deck, uh, it's kind of a small hybrid between like the hand trap version of deck, because you are playing quite a few hand traps. But I think that's just natural when you're playing uh, Invoked, just because you need stuff in the graveyard in order to fuse efficiently, and so you're naturally just gonna have a bunch of um, cards that will kind of pitch itself to the graveyard, and you'll have the ability to kind of fuse with it later. But yeah, I'm gonna go over to the deck. It's not really. It's kind of cookie cutter deck, I would say. Cookie cutter deck list here. So it's nothing too special, nothing too innovative, I would think. But with the cards we have available and the ban list that we have available, I think this is just gonna be like the most consistent cookie cutter version of the deck you can possibly play. So mainly what I wanted to do here is to explain some card choices, explain some combos maybe, for those who are not too familiar with how to pilot a deck like this. I have a lot of experience piloting Invoke, decks, and I do have some experience piloting Shaddoll decks. I mean, had some experience when it first kind of came out. But obviously, I prefer the Invoke fusions over to the Shaddoll fusion. My friend who plays Shaddolls, he's more of an expert on Shaddolls, and he plays mostly pure Shaddolls mixed with another engine. He's been doing like Shaddolls, Dogmatika, Shaddolls. I think he's doing Adventures now, or if not Adventures, he's doing it with Punk. I think is another like sort of budget way you can play the Shaddoll deck. When I first started playing Shadolls, I think I was playing it when I borrowed a friend's deck, and we were playing it when Soul Charge was at 3. That was a format, so you would just do like Shadolls with what's that card? The Lightsworn engine, like Raiden and stuff, and you would just kind of mill yourself, and then Soul Charge yourself 1,000,000, and then make a pretty big Synchro and Fusion board. And yeah, I mean that was the deck back then. I didn't like that deck version because that deck really required you to mill yourself really well. It was kind of inconsistent, and I ran into a lot of time issues in when I was piloting at big tournaments. My first time piloting it, I ended a lot of matches in a draw. So, I mean that was my experience the first time I um, took held of a Shaddoll deck. But since then, I played different variants of Shaddolls and um, Invocation. And while this deck right here, haven't have fully finished built out yet. I do want to try to finish it up, but it's kind of expensive. I do kind of know how to pilot the deck and the general idea of the deck, and whatnot. Anyways, kind of rambled on there. All right, so we're just gonna try to quickly go through some of the card choices and explain to you the idea behind each of the cards in case you were wondering what they're for. Most of it is self-explanatory. If you're familiar or have seen this deck, you should kind of know what it does. But if you're not, It's kind of a newer um, guide for players that have just gotten into Master Duels and they kind of see this deck and they want to try it, but they're not too sure what each of the cards do. Here you are. Hopefully that you find this helpful. So first card we got is Effect Veiler. Basically just gate something on your opponent's basically their main phase. So one of the better effect negation. It's a light type, so it synergizes with both your Alistar Invoke engine and your Shaddoll engine, because you need lights to operate this deck. Because your main two fusions are the Shaddoll Construct and the Macabre, the Invoked Macabre, both which require light material either from your deck or your graveyard. This is one of the better monsters to play. Now you can also opt to play Nibiru instead. I would say if you were gonna play Nibiru, I would play one Nibiru. I wouldn't play more than one. In Master Duels right now, because Maxi is at 3, if you have Nibiru in hand and a Maxi in hand or something, they're kind of redundant. Like once you play a Maxi, if you Maxi someone, they're very, very unlikely to take that challenge. They probably won't extend more than maybe 2 to 3 extra cards to that you can draw off of Maxi. They'll stop, so they're not likely gonna take the challenge. If they do take the challenge, that's what the Nibiru is for. Nibiru can come in and wipe their board, especially if you're going first and they go second and you Maxi them and they take the challenge and they think they can OTK you, then you can play Nibiru right over here. I guess here's Nibiru. So yeah, you can play Nibiru instead and maybe tackle their board down that way. You're also playing some Ash Blossoms and Effect Veilers, so you should draw into some other form of disruption. You also have impermanence here also, so you have several different ways to draw into different disruptions. So you should be able to, if they do take a Maxi challenge, you should hopefully be able to interrupt their board, even if you're not playing Nibiru. So next almost mandatory card is going to be Maxi. If you're planning on playing competitive at all, you're gonna really need this card. Now if you don't have this card, it just makes certain you're gonna be playing from behind basically. It's like a pot of greed that stops your opponent from playing the game, kinda. So you really do need to play the Maxi here. So a triple Maxi. You could play the Earth Fusion, either the Shaddoll Earth Fusion, or which was I think Shek, or the big Kaliga. I forget what the invoked Earth guy was. I think it was the vanilla Magellika, or whatever you call it, named after the I think the astronomer. But yeah, it's just a 3K beater. It's not that great. So I opt, because our extra deck space is kind of tight. So I opted not to play him, and I opted not to play the Shaddoll Earth either, because the problem with the Earth one, it needs Shaddoll cards in your hands to pitch to negate card effects, and we're primarily not a Shaddoll deck. While it would seem like we're a Shaddoll deck, we're still mostly a invocation deck with the a lot of lights and a splash of the Shaddoll engine, just to have some pretty cool extended plays with our fusion and stuff like that. So in terms of the Shaddoll monsters in the deck, you really only need to play 4. Why you play 4? Namely because you have 3 Shaddoll fusion, so you're playing one more up from what you would play from a Shaddoll fusion. So like, let's say if you're playing like, I don't know, triple Rhoda for example, you would probably want at least a minimum of 4 targets for your Rhoda, so that way if you do draw one of your targets, your other 3 Rhodas are potentially still active. So that's just the idea behind the number here. So you play 4 Shaddolls, you play Falco, Dragon, Ariel, and Beast. So Falco, you play the Falco because he's an extra body. You dump him with the fusion, or if you had that hard fusion him or whatever, you dump him. He is a replacement, so he replaces himself by summoning himself. So there's that. And if he does survive, you can flip him and bring some maybe a Shaddoll fusion back from your grave in case one of them dies, or you can bring back one of your other Shaddoll creatures. So yeah, Falco is just utility, something there to uh, dump with the fusion here and get back potentially. Dragon for back row hate. You don't really need to play Shek or not Shek, Skolmata, because Skolmata you aren't really dumping anything useful with Skolmata, so I wouldn't bother with Skolmata. You could play Hedgehog, I guess. I don't think it's that great, not in this particular version, because you don't really want to be searching your Shaddoll creatures or monsters and spells as much. So unless you set him and flip him, but it's kind of slow, so don't bother with that. So Dragon mainly just pop back rolls, 19 beats if you need to run over something, and potentially he could be like a Gravekeeper Spy, and just bounce something back to the hand, which sometimes does come up. So that'd be your second Shaddoll. Aerial, definitely really good here. You want to use Aerial to hit people's graveyard, because there's still a ton of decks that rely on graveyard, and you want to definitely for sure use her to hit the graveyard. I don't think you ever really summon her in terms of like flipping her. What was this? Okay, yeah, her flip effect, that rarely ever comes up. But I mean, if you did successfully summon like a construct and you banished your construct to fuse into a Makaba, then yes, if you set her, you flip her, you can bring back your construct if it was successfully summoned. So yeah, I mean, she has her flip abilities, so Beast here just to once again dump and draw. You're also playing 4 Shaddoll, because there's a potential for you to activate a fusion and then dump two of your Shaddolls to make a window. That's why you're also playing the 4 copies, just in case that does happen. Most of the time you're going to be playing into a construct. Now construct has an effect where it dumps, and you really don't want to be really dumping with construct's effect as much, because you'd be kind of thinning your deck out, and you're not going to really have any good way of recycling your Shaddoll monsters. You're only playing 4, so just kind of be careful with her effect. I think you might be able to dump what you really want to dump, I think, is like this Schism here, and then be able to revive it back or bring it back with Akopone here. But I don't remember what I usually dump with construct at all, if anything. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think you really dump anything with the construct. But yeah, so yeah, just be careful there when you play the fusion. Just make sure you choose the right Shaddoll for the right situation. In terms of outside of the Shaddolls, obviously I like 3 Ash Blossoms in this particular deck, because you're a control deck more than a combo deck. So you want to control people's ability to search, and you want to kind of also hit their maxi. If they try to maxi you, you can just Ash Blossom that, so it kind of balances it out. You could just play 2 if you wanted to, and play like a different hand trap. You can even do Droll and Lockbird if you have that, for more of a budget reason. You can do Droll and Lockbird, or you can do more Veilers, or you can do Nibiru. I think that's only other real good choice here. I don't think you want to play Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre is not too great in this format, not without Sword Soul. With Sword Soul, I think Ghost Ogre is worth playing in the main, but outside of that, I don't think anything else here is main worthy. So besides maybe the Droll and Lock, I don't think Phantasme is main worthy for sure either, so I wouldn't play Phantasme in the main. Next off, you got your triple Alistar. Definitely need 3 of him. You're playing, unless you're playing the deck wrong, I guess. So you always want to see him. He's your primary normal summon target, so always want to start off with the Alistar if you can. Next off, Ecclesia. Now you can play 2 of her if you want instead of 3. I know she can get a little cloggy in the deck if you have to choose between summoning Alistar or summoning the Ecclesia. On top of that, when I play Dragoon, I usually use Ecclesia as a second body. I usually go Alistar, search for his fields, search for Invocation, and then send Alistar to the graveyard to summon Armides. And with Artemis, you can be able to special summon Ecclesia from hand and don't use her effect. If you don't use her effect, you can still special summon from the extra deck, and you would send Ecclesia and the Artemis to bring out a Vert. And when you bring out Verte, you can activate Verte to dump you know, your Red Eyes fusion and bring out a Red Eyes Dragoon. Usually you'll end up on the board with Mikaba, Vert, and Dragoon, and maybe like a face down card and like maybe 2 to 3 cards in your hand to negate stuff with. So that's the idea. But in being the OCG, that combo is not really possible. She's not that great in this particular deck. You can probably cut her down to 2 and be fine with it, honestly. If you cut her down to 2, I would suggest maybe another hand trap or another Shaddoll that you would find good. Like I said, I don't think there's that many Shaddolls that are great as a standalone. It's not Shaddoll wrong. Yeah, so I think the only other good choice might be Windy, but Windy is kind of iffy too. So she is a replacement effect. She does summon out another Shaddoll and stuff like that. But you know, I don't know. If I had to choose another Shaddoll to play, maybe it'd be a Hedgehog. You know, ironically, I don't have a Hedgehog, huh? That's kind of weird. I would have thought I had a Hedgehog by now. Maybe I'll just craft just the one. Oops. Just to have the one. Yeah. So, that's it in terms of the most of the major monsters. I guess the last 2 monsters here is gonna be Maximus and Fleur. I do like Fleur. You could probably bump him up to 2 and wouldn't be that bad. You know, you could probably take out an Ecclesia and put Fleur to 2 if you had the budget to. I don't think he's super duper necessary, but he's still a really good card in general. Maximus here is great. You can you want to use him to kind of dump some of your value fusions. You want to dump like Antis, or you want to dump Al Capone. You want to dump Titaniclad. Those are going to be your main targets to dump, or you dump like a window or something if you have El Shaddoll fusion and get that back to your hand. So kind of utility, not that great. It's also a body, kind of a weird body because it's 3,000 defense, so he's mostly going to be defending you rather than attacking. But choice is up to you. You don't really have to play him. You do want to be careful with him though. You don't want to be activating this against a mirror match or against a deck that's playing Herald of the Arclight. So when you do use his effect, gotta be careful. And also, if your opponent's playing like no extra deck, then you can't even use his effect because it's an also. So by the ruling that both things kind of happen to happen, but you get to choose first, then your opponent does the thing. So yeah, so that's it. So that's your monster lineup. I think it's just 20 monsters. Not much to say about that. Next off, I chose to play Harpy's Feather Duster. I don't really have much back row hate outside of the dragon, and I guess one Entis if I can ever get that into the graveyard. So I think I opt for Feather Duster over like a Lightning Storm or over a whatchamacallit, evenly match, namely because those cards, they can't be activated if you have something face up. Normally, if you're playing the deck, you're always going to have a Magical Meltdown face up, so those cards kind of become dead in your deck. So I would probably avoid not playing evenly match or Lightning Storm. So you could play Regeki or something, but I think the back row removal is better. So I decided to just main deck the Harpy's Feather Dusters there. Terraforming, just, search for your Meltdown. Not much to say about that. And then your first fusion spell is you want to max out on the Shaddoll fusion because you want to see this in your opening hand if possible. Like I said, this deck likes to go second, namely because of this card here. If your opponent summons any sort of extra deck monster, you can Shaddoll fusion to kind of get your value engine started. And then so you definitely want to play 3 of them. We're not playing any El Shaddoll fusion because El Shaddoll fusion is just almost impossible to use in this deck because you're not going to have that many Shaddoll monsters to be able to make it worthwhile to play. So don't bother with the El Shaddoll fusion. I wouldn't even bother with 1 copy of it. 1 copy even seems kind of cloggy with the deck. So don't bother with that. Invocation here at 2, you honestly, because it recycles itself, and you're not playing Pot of Desires or anything like that. It's kind of a brick card, and so you don't want to see it in your opening hands. You don't want to draw like 2 or 3 of these in your opening hand. That feels real bad. But you do play 2 copies to be redundant, but the 3rd copy is not super necessary. So I would just play 2 here and stop and play something else better. Next off is Servant. Nadir Servant. Nadir Servant, pretty self-explanatory. It's a 1 of. It's a potential plus, 2 to 3. So one of the best cards in the deck. It does lock you out of your extra deck, but you should probably play this as kind of the last thing you do in the turn for the most part. Sometimes you will start off with this, and it will be fine. Like your Dogmatika stuff is no joke either. Like there's sometimes I would never draw Alistar in some of my games, and I draw just a bunch of Dogmatika stuff. With my real life deck, I can still beat my opponent with just straight Dogmatika stuff and not even playing any of the Invoked stuff. So yeah, Nadir is good. It's at 1 unfortunately, but I definitely think you can still play the deck without Nadir, but Nadir is a great card to see. Yeah, Magical Meltdown, search your Alistar. You're basically playing a total of 6 Alistars in the deck, terraforming the 2 Meltdown and this. Basically, those 6 cards can also fetch any of the invocations. So yeah, 2 Meltdown. Next best polymerization is going to be Super Poly. This deck has a lot of targets for Super Poly, so you can Super Poly into like Mudrock Dragon, Super Poly your opponent. If you have like a face down Shaddoll or something, you can Super Poly them away, or you have like a face up Alistar that got like effect barrier or impermanence. You can use him and Super Poly him and whatever element or attribute they might have that you have to play. I'll explain the extra deck later, but I only play like 3 attributes from there, 3 or 4. So you can't you can't Super Poly everything, but you can Super Poly most of the meta. So I think it's still a real good card to play at least 2. And there's a small combo with it with the Verte. So yeah, 2 is pretty good. Next off, Call by the Grave, pretty self-explanatory here. Main thing is just hand traps, and you can use it as like a crappier DD Crow, I guess. Not as good because it only targets monster, but still good enough. The other utility part is that sometimes your opponent doesn't realize that they cannot activate the effect again until the next turn. No, not until the end of the turn. So if you it's on like their turn, and they they max C you or effect failure you activate it, you negate it. Next turn, if they try to effect failure you again, effect failure would just still be negated. So yeah, that's just a really good card, and definitely I think it does deserve to be at 1 or even banned. I think 2 seems kind of weird, but yeah. Next off, your other best disruption here outside of the monster hand traps is going to be impermanence. I think impermanence definitely real good utility card here. It's better than Ash in some sense. I think Ash would be better in this particular deck only because it gives you a body in the graveyard, but we have plenty of ways of getting a light type in the graveyard, so I think Ash is not super necessary at 3. I think impermanence though is a good 2 or 3 of, so definitely triple impermanence if you can afford to get it. As you can see, I'm kind of still working on getting a playset, so I don't have it myself yet. I'm still grinding out the game a little bit. Punishment is great, just single target removal, up to 2 to potentially plus 2 with this. Only playing 1 because it does hard lock you out the turn after you play it. So if you play it during your opponent's turn, you're most likely kind of shit out of luck, and you're not gonna be able to fuse or just link or do whatever that you need to do with your extra deck. Sometimes you can use it during your turn. I mean, sometimes you can use it during your turn, kill your stuff, pass to your opponent, and when they pass it back to you, again, you can still the lingering effect for punishment will no longer be applying to you. So you should be able to go ahead and summon from your extra deck. So yeah, just a 1 of. Ideally here, you're gonna use Ecclesia, summon her. If you have like Maximus or Fleur in your hand already or whatever, then you search for the punishment as another card that you can set and kind of forget until you need it. Schism's a broken Shaddoll fusion card, I guess. it fuses from the graveyard, so it's kind of like invocation, but you can do it at spell speed 2, which is nice to do it on your opponent's turn. And then when it summons, it also sends your opponent's monsters to the graveyard, stuff like that. So it's good against Dragoon, good against stuff like that. But obviously Dragoon's not in the game, so you don't have to really worry about that. But ideally, what you used to do was you would go Nadir, dump like an Al Capone, and then you would. Let me remember if I did a combo right. You dump that, summon, get the Ecclesia, and then I think Al Capone triggers, and then you would just pitch a you would pitch whatever spell you want, or I guess you would search first then pitch. So oftentimes you would search out the schism and set the schism, and you pitch whatever card you want. So that's why Schism's a pretty good card to play, and definitely think you should at least play one copy in this particular build. Sometimes back in the old build, you only played Schism and you didn't play any. You played 0 Shaddolls in the main, and you just played Winda, Al Capone, and Construct, and this card would still work in a full build Dogmatika deck. So this card, I played it in real life. I didn't like it in real life, but I think Master Duel is a different story. So I think in Master Duel, this card is pretty good, especially with a mixed fusion themed deck. I think Shaddoll Schism is definitely one of the best cards in the deck. So yeah, not much to explain about that. Next off, the extra decks is kind of weird, because in real life the synchros or the link monsters are so much better. The synchros for this deck are sorry, I think I was kind of losing my train of thought there. Not synchro, but links aren't that great for this particular deck, but all the fusion stuff is good for the deck. But the problem with the fusion is that you need utility, because you're playing the Dogmatika deck, so you need utility. So if you cut out Dogmatika stuff, the fusion deck would look a little bit different. But I think because we're adding some utility stuff to dump with Nadir, or dump with Maximus or something, we do want a couple of value targets to send to the graveyard to go ahead and get a in order to get fusion off on your opponent's turn. And it kind of works with punishment. Assuming maybe you punish them your turn, you're not really fusing, you set some stuff past turn. If you have like a super poly set, or a punishment or super poly, or a schism set, then you can fuse on your opponent's turn. So some synergy there, not really big, barely comes up, but you do have the option to do that. Next off, Vanity's Emptiness. If you flip this, they don't have an answer, they just all scoop there for the most part. So yeah, definitely one Vanity Emptiness. I think that's the way to go. And I think I did mention the extra deck, so let's go ahead and just go over that really quickly. One Entis, you aren't going to really be sending her to the graveyard that much, since you only have one Nadir and like one Maximus. You barely is ever going to enter your graveyard, so I wouldn't worry about playing more than just one. Kaliga, because you're playing a bunch of darks, you can fuse away your darks in your graveyard. Something like the Kaliga. Kaliga itself is its own main floodgate, but Kaliga can be a floodgate, but I think there's just better ways to use him. Especially as a body, so you can still kind of use him as a body, so it's not the worst thing ever. A Mudrock Dragon, because we want to play this, because the Venom Dragon and the Predator Plant Dragon, I forgot what the name was. Yeah, this one right here. Dragon Stalpia, or whatever you call it. Most of your fusions in this deck can be used with either Alistar or a Shaddoll monster. So if you were gonna super poly something, you'll probably have the elements or the attributes in order to just go ahead and pitch it to go ahead and or sorry, because yeah, you have so many ways to super polys. Like you can always summon any of these with the correct elements. The Venom Dragon and the Predator Plant seem less useful and less cool. The one thing you can do with the combo is if you're gonna need this plus a Verde, so you can super poly. If you get out Verde, you can super poly one of your opponent's monster and send him to the graveyard to summon out the Murderrock Dragon. The way you do that is you can use a Predator Verde's first effect to make something a dark. That barely ever happens. I forgot I even had that effect, but you target something, make it a dark, and activate Verde's effect, send super poly, and then you can fuse your Verde away, plus their monster into a I don't know, into another construct or whatever you want it to be. So, or Mudrock Dragon, I guess in this particular scenario. So yeah, that's why Mudrock Dragon is there. So, good target for super poly, and good target for Verte too when you need to do some stuff with there. Next off, Winda. Winda 2 I think is the best number for the deck. You could even, I mean, some of the Shaddolls, like you can even put them at 1/1/1 or whatever. But I think 2 Winda, 1 Al Capone, and 2 Construct is the way to go. Al Capone, you don't really ever summon him with the regular fusion effect. You're mainly gonna be dumping him to kind of start your combo off to get the Schism out. So yeah, Al Capone not super useful, so just the one out there. Yeah, like I mentioned, double construct is not a good way to go because you are playing a bunch of lights. So yeah, double construct seems to be in a good spot to be played. Unfortunately, I don't think you really get the chance to use his dump effect as much unless it benefits you. But yeah, I wouldn't play anything else or extend your Shaddoll lineup too much more. So yeah, double construct there. Next off, your Purgatrio for the Ash Blossom. Purgatrio will end some games, and it has happened where my opponents set a bunch of very weak powered or weak defense monsters, and they thought they can protect it or something, but you summon out like the Purgatrio and just attack them and do piercing damage, enough piercing damage to kind of kill them. So yeah, it does come up. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name, but he can be, or she or he, is just a good fusion target for Alistar and a fusion monster. It kind of does the same purpose as this one, because this one requires a dark and a fusion and a dark monster, but your Alistar is a dark monster. It's oftentimes the only monster you have on the board because he is a win con on of its own. So yeah, you do have some other dark targets, but he's the main target for doing the Sanctuary combo. Unless you already have the combo set up, then don't worry about it. Titanic Class for the extra value off of whatever you need. Real good value engine there. Double Macabre, the heart and soul of any Invoked deck. Double Macabre for sure. 1 Armenides because you there's times where you summon Alistar and he gets like negated by an effect failure or an impermanence. You can also sacrifice him or send him to the graveyard, summon out your Armenides, and then immediately after that you can special summon Ecclesia and then use her effect if you wanted to. And so yeah, so if you normal summon Alistar and they somehow stop it, then that's one way to kind of work around it, is to send it to the graveyard and bring out a linked monster. The Artemis effect, none of it is relevant really, so I wouldn't really bother with any of his effect. Namely, just need his need her for a body, I guess, to basically sorry, kind of lost my train of thoughts. Yeah, so you need him to link away to kind of pave the road to other effects and attacks methods through your man. I'm losing a little bit of my train of thought. I'm a little tired. I won't lie. It's been a long day today, and I tried recording this video earlier, but was kind of tired and kind of a bad idea to record it now too. Anyways, let me try to finish this up here. So, last cards is just gonna be the Verde here. And Verde, like I mentioned, is used for super poly targets. It's used to mainly try to get your Shaddoll fusion. You just need 2 monsters. Alistar, maybe go into Archimedes, special summon this, don't use their effect, send them for full send them for the Verde, and then use Verde, and just go on from there. Most of the time, what you'll end up on the board, what hopefully you should end up on the board with, is like a Shaddoll, Winda, and maybe a Macabre. And Winda plus Macabre is very difficult to get over. You can protect yourself from most spells. Winda's got cannot be destroyed by card effects. Plus, you also have the Alistar in hand, so if they try to run over Winda, you can always pump the Winda up. And yeah, your opponent is just gonna have a very hard time removing both of them. Maybe one, but not both. Oftentimes. So this is kind of like your soft lock here. That's your main kind of win con. So you want to shoot to be able to get Macabre out and win out at the same time. Ending on a board with just a Winda is not that great. They have plenty of ways to out it. But yeah. So yeah, that's what Verde is there to do. You're not summoning Dragoon. You're not summoning a Phoenix Enforcer. You're just going to be trying to abuse this to get the free fusions off of either Shaddoll Fusion or Super Poly. Unfortunately, you cannot fuse with Invocation because it's not technically a fusion card. So there's that. Okay, I think that's basically everything I wanted to talk about. I know it's a long video. It is kind of like more of a tutorial video that hopefully it kind of explains some of the card choices and the ideas behind the deck to kind of help you make a better deck or adjust the deck however you like to, depending on your play style. And that's why I always recommend just find a base template for a deck that you might like to play, and then kind of tweak it. Maybe you don't like some of the card choices or some of the ideas behind it, but you at least have an idea of what to do and how to change it, and hopefully not make the consistency worse. Because the whole idea is to be pretty consistent with the deck, and so yeah, that's what the card choice is for. It's min-maxing is your choices so that you can kind of squeeze in all your ideas. And 40 cards is very hard to do. I mean, you could up the deck to maybe like a 43, 44 without really affecting your statistics. But once you go over 45, I think, then you're getting into some sort of weird statistical part of the game where you might not consistently draw like your Shaddoll Fusion or something. If you play like Pot of like Prosperity, you I guess you could, but then you lose out on your utility of your extra deck if you banish too much of it. Being that you're a fusion deck, it's very difficult and it would be very difficult for you to convince me that Pot of Prosperity or Pot of the Extravagance would be worth running in the deck. Namely because for the long game, like Shaddoll deck is a grindy deck. Like this Invoked deck is a grindy deck, and you're not really gonna be hoping to win in 1 or 2 turns. You need your extra deck to grind out your opponent. So, at least in my opinion, from my experience, I don't think drawing those extra cards and then losing your entire extra deck to banishing it is worth the slightly added consistency that or card advantage that the Pot of Prosperity or Pot of Extravagance may add to the deck. So just be careful of that. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can if you play it. I would be okay with playing Pot of Desires, I guess, because some of this stuff is redundant. So you're okay with banishing a couple of this stuff and getting away with it. Like you can banish like a Shaddoll Fusion, or you can banish it like maybe 1 Invocation, and you can still play the deck. But there are a couple of important one-of cards in the deck that cannot be replaced. If you do play Pot of Desires, you might lose out on some of your Shaddoll targets. Like maybe you lose all of them, or you lose out on all the invocation or something like that, or you lose out on like the Schism, and that can kind of affect your combo and your line of play. And you know, it's like at that point, is the 2 cards you draw really worth it if you lose all the single target part of your deck that you're gonna need for the deck to kind of run. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I want to mention. Hopefully, that helped, and if it did, then yeah, just let me know. Otherwise, you know what to do. So, see you guys next time.